There's one film Clint Eastwood refuses to talk about. Not because it flopped. It didn't. Not because he was ashamed of his performance. He wasn't. But because something happened behind the scenes that left a mark even he won't explain. A project filmed at the peak of his rising fame that he now pretends doesn't even exist. So what exactly happened on the set of this forgotten 1970 Western? And why, over 50 years later, does Eastwood still refuse to rewatch it? Before Clint Eastwood became one of Hollywood's most legendary figures, a man whose squint alone could carry a scene, he was just another anonymous face grinding through the outskirts of show business. And long before the sharp suits, six-shooters, and unforgettable one-liners, he was Clinton Eastwood Jr., a lanky kid growing up during the darkest years of the Great Depression. Born in 1930 in San Francisco, Eastwood's early years were shaped by economic instability. His father, a steelworker, moved the family frequently in search of jobs, dragging young Clint from one California town to another. These weren't glamorous years. Eastwood grew up tall, quiet, and tough. Not from some movie star instinct, but because he had no choice. Survival came first, and that no-nonsense grit would later become the backbone of his screen persona. After high school, there were no acting classes or stage auditions. Instead, Eastwood worked a long list of blue-collar jobs: lumberjack, hay baler, gas station attendant, steel worker. He once dug swimming pools to make ends meet. There was no clear path to Hollywood, and no one was calling his name. But fate has a strange way of working. In 1951, Eastwood was drafted into the U.S. Army and sent to Fort Ord. He didn't see combat, but what he did see was opportunity. Fort Ord happened to be a hot spot for future Hollywood talent. Actors, drama coaches, and future filmmakers came through those gates, and Eastwood, with his striking looks and composed demeanor, didn't go unnoticed. After the Army, he landed a screen test at Universal Studios. His early performances were, by most accounts, stiff and awkward. But his look, tall, rugged, with that squint that looked like he could see through walls, was undeniable. He was cast in a few forgettable roles, often playing background cowboys or silent extras. Hollywood didn't know what to do with him yet. That changed in 1959, when he was cast as Rowdy Yates in the television western Rawhide. At first, it seemed like another supporting gig, but something happened. Week after week, viewers kept tuning in, and they couldn't take their eyes off Eastwood. His character wasn't the lead, but he carried a raw intensity that quietly stole every scene. Suddenly, Eastwood was more than a face in the crowd. He was a presence. Rawhide made him a television star, but it was still a narrow lane. Eastwood was itching for more. He was done being told how to stand, how to talk, how to act. And then, just when most actors would settle for a safe TV career, Clint Eastwood took a risk that changed film history. He said yes to a strange, low-budget Western being filmed in Spain. The director barely spoke English. The pay wasn't great. The project sounded risky, even foolish. But the role, a silent, unnamed gunslinger with a lethal stare, was exactly the kind of character Eastwood knew he could embody. That film was a fistful of dollars. What followed was cinematic alchemy. For a few dollars more, and the good, the bad, and the ugly completed the so-called Dollars trilogy, and transformed Clint Eastwood from a TV cowboy into an international icon. He wasn't just a star, he became the face of the new Western, darker, grittier, stripped of morality. But with fame came frustration. Despite his rising profile, Eastwood still had to answer to studios, directors, and producers who didn't fully grasp what he brought to the screen. He was caught between two identities: the stoic anti-hero the world loved, and the actor yearning for creative control. That tension would come to a head in a project he'd later try to forget. And that project was Two Mules for Sister Sarah. By 1970, Clint Eastwood was riding high. The Dollars trilogy had made him a global phenomenon, and audiences couldn't get enough of his icy stare and cold, methodical presence. He was the man who barely spoke, but said everything with a twitch of his jaw. His image was bulletproof, and Hollywood was finally starting to treat him like a leading man. So when Two Mules for Sister Sarah landed on his desk, it looked like a win from every angle. It was a Western, his bread and butter. It had a political edge, with a storyline tied to the French intervention in Mexico. Just enough historical depth to elevate it. It was directed by Don Siegel, a man Eastwood respected, and would go on to collaborate with multiple times. And his co-star? Shirley MacLaine, one of the most respected and dynamic actresses in Hollywood. On paper, the film should have been a perfect fit. The premise was strange, but promising. Eastwood would play Hogan, a rugged American mercenary operating south of the border, who rescues what appears to be a Catholic nun from an attempted assault by bandits. She's mysterious, sharp-tongued, and clearly hiding something. Together, the unlikely pair journeys through hostile territory, dodging French troops and revolutionaries alike, with danger lurking at every turn. It had all the makings of a genre-bending hit. Part Western, part buddy comedy, with hints of romance and political intrigue. The chemistry between Eastwood's hard-edged stoicism and MacLane's firebrand energy was meant to be the driving force of the film. Universal Studios had high hopes. Eastwood was becoming a box office draw, and MacLane brought critical credibility. But from the moment filming began, something felt off. The tone was never quite right. Was it a comedy? A satire? A serious war film? No one seemed sure. The script tried to juggle humor with grit, irony with intensity, but it didn't land cleanly. For Eastwood, who preferred lean, focused storytelling and emotional realism, the film's uneven pacing and offbeat dialogue were frustrating. He was trying to build a career on authenticity and tension, but Two Mules for Sister Sarah leaned too far into campy irony. Behind the scenes, things got worse. The relationship between Eastwood and MacLane, central to the film's success, was anything but harmonious. And it was about to become one of the most uncomfortable working dynamics of Eastwood's entire career. Clint Eastwood isn't known for losing his cool. Throughout his decades-long career, he's developed a reputation for calm under pressure. The guy who shows up, gets the shot, and leaves the drama to everyone else. But on the set of Two Mules for Sister Sarah, even Eastwood couldn't hide his frustration. The reason? Shirley MacLaine. MacLaine was an acclaimed actress, bold, outspoken, and intensely committed to her craft. She brought big energy to every role, and she wasn't afraid to challenge a director, rewrite lines, or debate how a scene should be played. That approach might have worked with other actors, but Eastwood was her opposite in every way. He was minimalist, internal, instinctual. He didn't rehearse out loud. He didn't analyze a scene to death. He simply was the character. Quiet, coiled, deadly. From day one, their differences were obvious. MacLane's assertive, sometimes theatrical style grated on Eastwood, who found her unpredictable and overwhelming. For his part, she reportedly saw Eastwood as too stiff, too locked into his image, unwilling to play, or to give her the dynamic reactions she expected. Their off-screen energy began bleeding into their on-screen dynamic, and not in a good way. Tensions escalated quickly. They disagreed on blocking, on tone, on lines. Even director Don Siegel, who would later become one of Eastwood's closest collaborators, struggled to balance their competing temperaments. At one point, Eastwood quietly referred to the production as miserable. Coming from someone as famously tight-lipped as Eastwood, that said everything. It wasn't a shouting match or a dramatic meltdown that ruined the experience. It was the constant friction, the slow-burning clash of egos and artistic values. Every scene became a negotiation. Every moment felt like work. For Eastwood, who valued efficiency and simplicity on set, the experience was exhausting, and it would leave a mark he never quite got over. Creative control is everything to a filmmaker like Clint Eastwood. And while Two Mules for Sister Sarah might have looked like a creative playground on paper, the final product was anything but satisfying to him. One of Eastwood's biggest issues was the film's tone. It couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Was it a gritty western with emotional stakes, a dark political allegory, or a light-hearted odd couple comedy with gunfights? To Eastwood, it felt like a little bit of everything, and a whole lot of nothing. The tonal confusion undermined the entire story. Then came the twist, the one that was supposed to give the film its bite. McClane's character, Sister Sarah, wasn't a nun at all. She was a prostitute posing as a sister for protection during the chaos of war. On paper, it was meant to be clever, a moment that flipped expectations. But Eastwood hated it. To him, the twist felt forced, almost cartoonish. It didn't deepen the story, it cheapened it. The revelation didn't serve the characters or the emotional arc, it just added a layer of irony that clashed with the danger and seriousness the film was trying to establish. It was the kind of gimmick Eastwood had little patience for. Even visually, the film missed the mark. The cinematography lacked the stark beauty of Sergio Leone's westerns. The editing was uneven. The final cut, in Eastwood's eyes, lacked the grit, realism, and weight that made a western mean something. More than anything, Two Mules for Sister Sarah reminded Eastwood of something he hated: being out of control. He wasn't directing. He wasn't shaping the story. He was still, at that point, a hired gun, reading someone else's lines, walking someone else's path. And it showed. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, Eastwood wasn't just done with the film. He was done with that version of himself. Something had to change. He needed to direct. He needed to own his work. And Two Mules for Sister Sarah became the final push that sent him in that direction. In every career, there's a line that separates the work you do from the work you choose to do. For Clint Eastwood, Two Mules for Sister Sarah drew that line in thick, permanent ink. By the early 1970s, Eastwood had already starred in some of the most iconic westerns ever made. But behind the scenes, he was growing tired of being told what to do, of delivering performances shaped by other people's vision. He had ideas. He had instincts. And Two Mules proved one thing beyond doubt. The only way to get the kind of film he believed in was to make it himself. The very next year, Eastwood stepped behind the camera to direct Play Misty for Me. It was a radical shift. Not a western, not a war movie, but a psychological thriller with a female antagonist and no clear-cut hero. It was tense, quiet, dangerous, and completely different from the confused energy of Two Mules. The difference was night and day. From there, Eastwood began crafting a filmography that felt more personal, more precise. He directed High Plains Drifter, a bleak, ghostly western that challenged the idea of the heroic cowboy. He followed that with the outlaw Josie Wales, Pale Rider, and Unforgiven. All films that dug deep into the soul of the American frontier, peeling back the mythology to reveal something darker and more human. And it wasn't just westerns. He tackled war, Flags of Our Fathers, romance, The Bridges of Madison County, even stories of real-life heroism, Sully, American Sniper. But the common thread? They were his tone, his pace, his message. In hindsight, Two Mules for Sister Sarah became more than a disappointment. It became a catalyst, A clear moment when Eastwood realized he couldn't keep being a passenger in someone else's story. He needed the wheel, and once he took it, he never let go. Over the decades, Clint Eastwood has spoken candidly about almost every stage of his life and career. He's reflected on his triumphs. He's admitted to personal failures. He's even joked about the films that didn't quite work. But when it comes to Two Mules for Sister Sarah, there's one thing he never does: watch it. He's never revisited the film, never offered any in-depth commentary, never spoken about it with the fondness he reserves for other early projects like Hang 'em High or Dirty Harry. When the film comes up in interviews or retrospectives, Eastwood goes quiet, sometimes brushing past it, sometimes avoiding it altogether. Why? It's not just about the on-set tension with Shirley MacLaine, though that clearly left a scar. It's not just the botched tone or the twist he found ridiculous. It's deeper than that. Two Mules for Sister Sarah represents a version of Clint Eastwood that no longer exists. A version that was still finding his footing, still being pushed around by producers, still saying yes to roles that didn't reflect who he was. Watching that film, for Eastwood, would mean revisiting a time when he wasn't in control. A time when he felt boxed in, misrepresented, and voiceless. The very things he's spent the rest of his career avoiding. And maybe that's why he leaves it buried. Unlike his other westerns, which are often referenced, restored, and celebrated, Two Mules is conspicuously absent from retrospectives, award tributes, or anniversary screenings. It's the quiet chapter, the awkward footnote, a film made by an actor who had not yet become an auteur, and who refuses to look back. Clint Eastwood has built one of the most legendary careers in Hollywood history, not just because of the roles he took, but because of the ones he left behind. And Two Mules for Sister Sarah became the film that marked the end of his compliance and the beginning of his command. After that experience, Eastwood no longer signed on just because a studio called. He became deliberate, intentional. He chose projects that aligned with his evolving identity as a filmmaker and storyteller. Roles with weight, stories with silence, characters that spoke through action, not exposition. He didn't chase trends, he set them. And along the way, he proved something rare, that artistic growth sometimes demands rejection. Not of others, but of your past self. The version that stayed quiet, played along, took the job, and hoped it would work out. Two Mules for Sister Sarah wasn't a disaster. It made money. It had big names. For some, it's even a nostalgic classic. But for Eastwood, it represented everything he never wanted to be again. A man with no say in how his story was told. And maybe that's why he doesn't revisit it. Because for him, it wasn't just a movie. It was a warning. In the vast library of Clint Eastwood's work, from gun-slinging classics to award-winning dramas, Two Mules for Sister Sarah stands alone. Not because it failed, but because it no longer fits the narrative of the man Eastwood became. It's the ghost of a role that didn't belong to him. A performance that didn't reflect his instincts. A collaboration that pulled him in directions he never wanted to go. And it became the silent reminder that control, real, creative control, isn't given. It's taken. So when Clint Eastwood refuses to rewatch that one film from 1970, it's not out of shame. It's because he's already seen everything he needed to. Once was enough. The rest of his career, the Oscars, the masterpieces, the legend, was built by walking away from that version of himself. And maybe that's the real story. Not why he won't watch it, but why he never had to.